Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to Industry Broadcast audio article number 40. Today's audio article is, of course, brought to you by IndustryBroadcast.com and is actually a compilation of two shorter audio articles written by Jamie Fristrom. Jamie is the technical director, designer, and partner at Torpex Games, and before Torpex, Jamie was a technical director and designer on Spider-Man 2, where his dynamic physical swinging system revolutionized the entire Spider-Man franchise. Other games he's worked on include Spider-Man 1, Tony Hawk, Die by the Sword, and the Magic Candle series of RPGs. For more information on what makes Jamie tick, we recommend that you head over to www.gamedevblog.com. Audio article number 40, Part A, titled Optimizing Your Team, written by Jamie Fristrom and read aloud by Ryan Wienko on the 8th of December 2008. Optimizing a team. Remember when I said that I was only going to present techniques we use to ship games? Well, I lied. We tried a new technique recently and we haven't shipped a game with it yet, and it has caused some problems, but I'm not ready to give up on it just yet, because it's about fundamentally improving your development process. It's about asking what's the right thing to do instead of are we doing things right. We ended up getting the idea from reading The Goal by Eliyahu M. Goldratt. Like most management books, there's a very low ratio of actual information to word count. It's a novel about a poorly run machine shop, and the guys realized that they have a bottleneck process and dealt with it. The idea of optimizing bottleneck functions appealed to the coder in me, of course. In the novel, in order to work around the bottleneck process, they did a few things. First, they made sure that they always keep the bottleneck process fed. Once the bottleneck process was always being fed, they made sure not to overfeed it. They did what they could to expand the bottleneck until some other process became the bottleneck. You can consider game development to be a lot like a machine shop. You have a bunch of assets, models, textures, components, features. These get built and passed to the next stage, assembled, and finally tested. During your final production phase, you could apply Eliyahu's technique to your shop. The first question is, how do you identify the bottleneck? Well, there's the non-scientific way. Ask which process everyone is complaining about. With Spider-Man 1, it was level scripting. What's taking so long, they would ask. This wasn't necessarily pejorative, although the scripters certainly felt it was. It may just be a fact of life that scripting missions and tweaking them until they're fun is a massive time sink. So once you've identified the bottleneck, what do you do? Keep them fed. In our example, mission designers need levels and characters and tools, as well as features to work with. But the models don't need to be textured, and the tools don't need to be perfect. They just need to be usable. Expand the bottleneck. In our case, we did this in two ways. We hired more designers, and we improved their tools. Yes, those same tools that I just said didn't need to be perfect to make their jobs easier. I even acted as a temporary mission designer to increase the bandwidth and see if there were any other ways we can improve on the process. We quickly found it wasn't possible to keep the designers busy with work, and we found ourselves with a lot of missions built up from placeholder elements that were far from being shippable. This matches perfectly what happened in The Goal. Once they expanded the bottleneck by running the machine double shifts, they discovered that sometimes it ran idle. They solved this by red tagging items that needed to be processed by the machine, and those became highest priority. Similarly, we started expediting any assets that the designers needed. Designers were no longer the bottleneck. Which brings us to the more scientific method of identifying a bottleneck, which is to look at the inventory. If there's a big pile of inventory waiting to be processed in front of some stage, for example, you've got a big pile of character concept art piled up in front of your character modeler, you can assume that that guy is the bottleneck. And again, this isn't pejorative. It may just be a fact of life that making concept art goes quicker than modeling and weighting characters. I've talked to other teams about their bottlenecks, and one interesting response I get was testing. On one team, every system they code goes through their testing department, quickly their testing department became overloaded. My feeling is that a lot of us would be overloading our testing departments if we attempted to test our games with the same kind of rigor that those guys did. The most frequent response I got, though, is that a factory model of production doesn't really apply to the world of game development, where things come in stages and traditional project management is more appropriate. If you're one of those shops that actually has the discipline to completely design your game on paper, then build the elements specific in that design, and then combine the elements into levels and missions, then yes, the factory model of production could work. But a production model like that doesn't make much sense. It implies that artists and coders are idle while designers finish designing, and then level designers are idle while people are making props and features, and then everybody is idle while the designers populate the levels with stuff. It could be better to build things piecemeal, break the game down into chunks, do concept and design for each chunk separately, and then run it through the factory. And if you're doing that, you can benefit from finding and expanding on bottlenecks. This concludes Part A of audio article number 40, and now for Part B, titled Old-Fashioned Communication. In one of my previous installments, I went over some things that you could do to increase communication within a team through software, but before we had Wiki and email at ICQ, we had lips and tongues. Even for people who type 100 words per minute, it's faster and easier to communicate with good old voice, and there are some things you can do to encourage this medium of communication. Meetings. We have a poster from despair.com on the door of our meeting room saying, "Meetings, none of us is as dumb as all of us." Sometimes I think you can learn all you need to know about management from despair.com as well as Dilbert. Meetings, when overused, become a bad thing. People are so busy talking that they stop doing, and it's easy for a whole room of people to simultaneously come to the wrong decision. Still, without meetings, we'd all be doing our own thing without regard to how it affects the project as a whole. And I believe that, despite groupthink, the chances of a group of people coming to a correct decision is greater than a single leader deciding something by fiat. On a large team, it's worth having the leads meet once a week. Try to keep the meeting short, and when they inevitably digress, somebody should pipe up and say, "Can't we take this offline?" For the individual disciplines, every other week is fine. At the discipline meetings, you can quickly go around the table and let each other know what everybody's working on, just to touch base. There's nothing wrong with spontaneous meetings. James Zachary, our lead animator, has a rule: 3 emails by any one person in a given email thread means that you should meet in person. I tend to let it go a lot longer because I feel that I type really fast. Feature meetings, where everybody involved in a feature gets together on a regular basis to look at the feature and discuss what still needs to be done, are a great way to keep everybody on the same page about the particular feature, level, or whatever. We hold these meetings once a week if some people aren't devoted on that feature full time, but usually everybody is working on the feature in parallel. If it's a key feature that everybody is depending on, it's sometimes worth a lot more attention. Here you can have a standing meeting, a meeting where nobody is allowed to sit down, of the people involved every day, and keep them updated on the progress. Finally, every now and then, it's nice to get the whole team together in a big room, show off the game, give a pep talk, and let everybody know where you are. We do this just a few times over the life of the project. Some teams do it every month. Offices. If you only have one person per office, it's easy for them to concentrate, but not likely that they will communicate. If you have too many people per office, a lot of communication will happen, but no actual work. Tom DeMarco talks about the importance of flow in peopleware, and there are plenty of anecdotes about how noisy offices are unproductive if person A asks person B, or even person C, a question while person B is in flow. Person B has supposedly lost n amount of minutes of work to save person A the n seconds it would take to look something up. In my experience, though, I've usually worked in crowded, noisy offices, and I've still somehow managed to ship a lot of games. How can this be? I have a couple of theories. Firstly, although sometimes a person is in flow, more often the person is waiting for a build to finish or a process to happen. So most of the time when you interrupt them, the cost is low. Second, it's better to do the right thing slowly than do the wrong thing quickly. How is this for an anecdote? Person A doesn't ask Person B that question, but soldiers on instead, and ends up doing the wrong thing, which has to be redone later. Lastly, people recognize when they're about to embark upon a mission that requires flow. In those times they put on headphones or shut the door to their admittedly shared office. Here's our rule of thumb on Team Spidey. The group was working on Spider-Man. Programmers are 2 to an office, artists are 2 to 3, designers are 3 to 4. Producers get cubicles in hallways. Some exceptions are made for expediency. Small offices for coders, since only 2 share. Big offices for designers, since there are probably 4 of them. Cubicles, particularly cubicles with high walls, are Satan. All the distractions of a giant shared office, very little of the communication benefits. Reorganization. Almost every product I've ever worked on has started small and grown massively as time went on. When this happens, it's tempting to take the trickle of a new team member and slot them in wherever you can find them. After a while, you'll find that you have an office floor plan that is not optimal for communication, which is why we tend to move people around a few times during the typical course of a typical project. We've done this so many times now that we've become experts at it. We come up with a layout for who goes where, write a list of the moves that have to be made to get everyone in the right spot, and then make them one by one. In a couple of days, the floor plan has changed. We call this the boost chain, since Chris Boost pioneered the technique. When you move everyone around, it means people come into contact with new people. You can make a graph of who communicates with whom on your project. Every person is a node, and you draw links between the ones who communicate. When you reorganize, this graph will tend to change. New links will form between the nodes, and the old links may weaken, but won't go away completely. The amount of communication on the team will go up. For a while, during the original Spider-Man, we mistakenly decided that it would be a good idea to organize the team by the level they were working on, rather than their discipline. Although this was a bad idea, designers could no longer ask each other questions on how to use the script language. Artists and designers wanted different levels of light in offices. It did help create a few new links in the communication graph, and it was not a total loss. Let the hubs be hubs. Conventional wisdom says that you should put your leads in private offices to help establish the image of authority. This is fine for a certain kind of lead, the sort of lead that spends more time overseeing and less time making critical decisions. There's another kind of lead, frequently without title, who leads simply by being a hub or a go-to guy, the person everybody asks for help. On your office floor plan, it's good to drop these leads right in the middle of things, surrounded by people who will need their help. Also, this way they can keep abreast of important decisions that people are making on the fly. And even your overseer type leads should have offices near the center of the team, rather than isolated but prestigious corner offices. You can always do what Peter Ackman, our founder and CTO, does, have the prestigious corner office and set up a workstation in the hallway right in the middle of everything. You spend most of your time there in the trenches. You can even work on the game title if you like, but make sure to stay off the critical path. Best of both worlds. It's even better than management by walking around. It's management by being right in the middle of things. Let things be. If there's a theme here, it's the communication will happen. All you have to do is remove the barriers and let it. One tempting blunder to make is to try to close off the lines of communication. I know that after seeing a programmer working on somebody else's pet project, I've been tempted to say, don't talk to one of the programmers without going through me first. But there's nothing wrong with people on the team talking. The problem comes when somebody goes off tasks onto low priority items. Just make sure that everybody understands that they're not supposed to switch tasks unless their lead or project manager knows about it, and let them talk all they want. This concludes audio article number 40, parts A and B, once again written by Jamie Fristrom, whose blog can be found at www.gamedevblog.com. As always, brought to you by IndustryBroadcast.com, where we update the site frequently, doing our very best to bring the collective